Good evening and welcome to KTN Weekend Prime. We are live across East Africa, from Uganda to Rwanda to Burundi to Tanzania, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Nairobi, Kenya. We are in 11 countries across Eastern Africa. Welcome to KTN Weekend Prime. Again, the point of news. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole.
My name is John Allen Namu, and tonight on The Other Kenya, we're discussing something that perhaps should have been part of the national discourse since the passing of the new constitution. It's something that would have affected or should affect the direction that the teacher strike debate is going through. Of course, the hashtag tonight is The Other Kenya, and that is the attainment of economic and social rights. I've got two people in studio this evening, two guests who bring very different complexion to this discussion. One of them, a legislator, Senator Hassan Omar, Senator from Mombasa County, who is bringing a bill to the Senate with respect to the enshrinement of the principles of dignity and the enforcement of economic and social rights. And I've also got Goldman Prize winner for 2012, politician and environmentalist Ikal Angele, someone who's been very deeply involved with this issue, especially in Turkana County and with the development of the Gibe Dam, which is across the border, but has serious economic and social effects for that community. But the discussion, of course, is nationwide. We're asking you whether you think that economic and social rights have taken a step back as we try and sort out our own political rights, devolution perhaps, and where they should be placed with respect to the development of the country.
That's true. So here's the hashtag, The Other Kenya, at KTN News, at Yvonne Okwara. Our SMS lines are also open to you. That is 22155, which is absolutely free. So any questions, any comments on that discussion are absolutely welcome. Also for our viewers across Eastern Africa, we have a WhatsApp number that will be showing on your screen. Standard rates for that apply, but this means that across Eastern Africa you can participate in this discussion as well. That discussion is coming up later, but first in this bulletin we'll have the top stories for you, and here they are.
We don't allow this to happen. We don't allow Kenyans to be blackmailed. We don't allow Kenyans to be intimidated.
Any misconduct by one member of parliament reflects on the entire institution of parliament.
Senator under fire. Muthama grilled, but police failed to specify the charges. Justifying the cause. What next for CORD's Solidarity Fund? Not so learned. LSK's annual general meeting aborts for the second year in a row. And lucky to be alive. Find out why this woman's skull is in her stomach.
Thank you for joining us on the program tonight. Our sign language interpreter is William Silla. Let's start off with Machakos Senator Johnston Muthama, who was this morning questioned by police over remarks he made last week at a CORD rally in Nairobi. Muthama, who was accompanied by CORD leader Raila Odinga, declined to record a statement after what his lawyer said was a failure by the police to specify why he was summoned. And as KTN's Aaron Ocheng reports, Speaker of the National Assembly J.B. Muturi has joined the fray by terming the senator's utterances as unfortunate.
It is a statement that has elicited varied reaction among politicians, the public, and even in discussions in the social media. The bone of contention being whether Senator Johnston Muthama was out of order when addressing the crowd that was present during the Solidarity with Teachers rally at the Uhuru Park grounds this past Wednesday. And following a summon to appear and record a statement before the Criminal Investigations Department, Muthama presented himself with a battery of lawyers together with the opposition chief.
Under the Constitution, the Cabinet Secretary has absolutely no duty, no role to play in the investigation of criminal offenses.
Actually, as a matter of fact, the police have not accurately explained what they want Senator Muthama to answer to. They wanted a statement and they made assertions that we know what Muthama said at Uhuru Park.
According to CORD leader, government is employing diversionary tactics to sway Kenyans from realizing how incompetent the Jubilee administration is, and Senator Mudhama may after all be a decoy in the right place.
This country is in a very serious situation. We are going through a major crisis. The schools are closed. The children are not in school. The teachers are home. And this is what actually the government should be addressing, rather than people who gathered at Uhuru Park to express their displeasure at what is happening in the country.
Don't ask leading questions because you're looking for a story to write.
Devolution Cabinet Secretary is at the center of it all, and her confession that close to 1 billion shillings has been stolen from her ministry is what prompted the Machakos senator to lambast the government for not doing enough to deal with graft.
Kiongozi wa bunge la kitaifa, liwe la seneti ama bunge la kitaifa, National Assembly, akisimama mbele za watu na kutoa maneno machafu, anaharibia wenzake.
And Kenyans will not allow this to happen. We will not allow this to happen. We will not allow Kenyans to be blackmailed. We will not allow Kenyans to be intimidated. Kenyans must stand firm.
Friday, Internal Security Cabinet Secretary, Chair, National Cohesion and Integration Commission, Director of Public Prosecution and Inspector General of Police through spokesman Charles Owino made it clear that it will not be business as usual for Mudhama, and true to their word, Mudhama was summoned early Saturday morning.
Hata kama haijafunja kipengele fulani katika sheria yetu sisi, lakini inaweza leta uhasama kati ya jamii wa Kenya. We are interested.
The debate that has also seen members of the clergy come in is to what extent is the damage of Mudhama's speech and who exactly the aggrieved party is in this whole spectacle. For now, Mudhama is a free man, since the CID failed to ascertain as to what charges they would prefer against the senator. Aaron Ocheng, KTN News.
Kenya opposition outfit CORD now says the solidarity account will no longer pay teachers. This follows a court ruling suspending the strike for 3 months, directing the Teacher Service Commission to pay teachers their September salaries. The Coalition for Reforms and Democracy says the money contributed will now be challenged to aid in payment of legal fees for the unions, despite the fact that the unions had already hired top-notch city lawyers to represent them in their legal battles. Samagina reports.
The suspension of the teachers' strike and subsequent order that the Teachers Service Commission pays teachers their September salary has thrown CORD off balance. The coalition unveiled the solidarity account to pay teachers through Kenyans' contribution.
Sisi sasa tumeamua kuanzia leo tunafungua account ya solidarity na walimu. Sawa? Pale ambapo tunataka kila Mkenya alipe pesa huko ndani.
But following the court's ruling, CORD now has to find ways of justifying the existence of the account and why Kenyans need to contribute. CORD remains tight-lipped on how much has been contributed so far, but ODM Elections Director Junet Mohamed says details of the contributions will be made public on Wednesday.
Nataka kila Mkenya pale uliko toa pesa, hata kama una ndururu lipa hapa. Inaitwa solidarity account with the teachers of Kenya.
The coalition, however, says the kitty will not be used to pay teachers, but to facilitate their court battles. This notwithstanding that both NAT and KUPPET had already hired a battery of senior lawyers, key among them being senior counsels Paul Mwite and Amenasir Abdullahi.
The issue of the Solidarity Fund was not really to pay teachers. It is really to assist them, particularly with the legal issues that they have, the expenses that they have to incur in courts. And the money is still needed by the teachers. As you saw that the Secretary General of NATO said they're going back to court on Monday. So we'll wait for the court ruling on Monday when they go back there. But the money, whatever is being contributed by Kenyans, is all going to be handed over to the teachers' union.
Depending on how much the solidarity account raises, pundits had questioned the sustainability of the initiative and if they would have raised the 17 billion shillings teachers are asking for.
Once we've handed over to the teachers, then we will close the fund. Right now, the teachers have said they need solidarity.
Analysts quip, CORD has put itself to test as the kitty's contribution would speak volumes about its support base. Samugina, KTN News.
The Law Society of Kenya's annual general meeting ended in disarray after a section of the members accused the LSK chair, Eric Mutua, and the governing council of gross misappropriation of funds. The members openly questioned the chair in regards to his hefty amounts of money they say the council has spent that cannot truly be accounted for. KTN's Timothy Otieno brings us this story.
The Bombers of Kenya Saturday morning played host to a delegation pregnant with the expectation of a way forward following the nasty conclusion to the Law Society of Kenya's previous annual general meeting held in March. The Friends of the Court were here to discuss a 2014 annual report and seek ways to improve their service to the public. But no sooner had the meeting begun when chaos reared its ugly head yet again, dogging the society this time with claims that the organization's financial report was glittered with gaping loopholes on how money had been spent.
We cannot be learned friends when we cannot maintain decorum. So I'm asking my fellow members, whatever you may have to say, please say in a decent manner. We don't have to shout at one another. Those who are not satisfied with the ruling, either they keep quiet, or if they do not want to participate further in the meeting, let them leave the hall peacefully. The expenses by council are not being highlighted. If that is the case, my suggestion going forward, for ease of understanding of accounts which we lawyers don't understand very well, including myself, is that in future there should be explanatory notes that clearly spells out what expenses go to council members.
The bone of contention among many others this time involves expenses the society highlighted that did not go down well with some members. In the annual report under the program's expenses, for instance, the figures revealed that last year's AGM cost 3.9 million shillings compared to 1.6 million in 2013. The members insist the bloated figures have not been well accounted for.
The welfare of members at certain times have not been looked at very, very well by the council. I'm coming to all your objections and come to everything, but can we do one thing before we become probably, and let me use this one, unruly, if I can use that one. Can we stand up in honor of the departed members, at least on that one, on that account? Let's stand in honor of the departed members. On that account, we can discuss the issue. Let's stand in honor of the departed members.
And when members requested the report undergo a vote before being adopted, the LSK chair Eric Mutua turned down the offer, stirring up an already agitated lot.
The chairman shall appoint not less than 3 scrutineers from amongst the members of the society to receive and examine the voting papers and certify the results of the vote. To wait, I'm not finished. 2 scrutineers. Listen. My proposal is the council admits that there is a problem, that we desire to solve the problem, that a committee of your council will be appointed. The individuals who have ideas should be co-opted into that committee, and you come up with regulations and we solve the problem looking to the future.
The members insist that Mutua and his team are bent on frustrating progress of the society and accused him of hand-picking representatives to constitutional commissions against the laid-out procedure.
It is now becoming very clear that all the chairman wanted to do today is to ensure that they, through fraud, continue expending the monies of the society by purporting to have adopted the financials of the society which has not happened here today.
We are going into an election year. We are extending all of them packing. All of them, no exception.
And so, for the second time in just 1 year, the meeting had to be prematurely adjourned with no solution to this now eminent stalemate between the LSK leadership and its members. Timothy Otieno, KTN News.
Our learned friends. Now, the Norwegian ship detained last week in Mombasa with UN cargo, including firearms, has been released after diplomatic intervention. Kenyan authorities have freed the Norwegian ship with its crew without pressing any charges, ending an 8-day stalemate with the United Nations. The ship had been commandeered by security commanders on suspicion of carrying illegal weapons and drugs. Upon its seizure, weapons were discovered stacked in UN armored carriers, but the United Nations protested the country's move to intercept the ship and subsequent inspection of its content. The United Nations claimed in conducting the inspection without its involvement was a breach of international protocol. UN Information Office said the weapons were legally being ferried and were destined for the Indian battalion operating in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They claimed the weapons had been declared in the bill of lading, a document between the shipper and the transportation company disclosing the contents being shipped, but that it was not declared in the manifest, which is the document declared to the government agencies showing what the ship is carrying. The UN has been engaging Kenya's Ministry of Foreign Affairs to end the diplomatic stalemate on its consignment.
Actually, 20 in total. 2 of them are captains. One is a Chinese captain and one is from Norway. The rest are Chinese staff who have been recruited to work in this particular ship, and their papers and documents were accurate. They have been released secretly. Now, why am I saying secretly? At the time of arresting this ship, we know the kind of action that had been brought about. But then again, now when the ship was being released last night, were you members of the press even involved? Were you even allowed to come in? You were actually even, I was at the port and I saw nobody was allowed to enter. Apart from me, we went to the police station to ensure that nobody has been left behind, to also ensure that nobody is going to be charged or nobody had been arrested. So when they do this during the day and arrest the ship and then release it in the middle of the night and say that we have released the ship because the investigations are complete, they have not even said it or declared it right now. So I'm actually informing you what has happened because I know that is a fact and I was present. So they also need to come forward and they also need to come and apologize as well because they know what they have done was actually wrong.
A woman in Machakos County is living with bones and parts of her skull stashed inside her stomach. This is in the aftermath of an incomplete medical operation that she reportedly underwent in India without the knowledge of her family. Muremi Mwangi has the details.
That the missing parts of her deformed head are safely stashed inside her stomach is a miracle. A medical miracle to be precise, but one which has sadly descended this family into a daily life of pain and agony.
Si unajua iko hapa. Imepupa yote. Hii ya hapa na ya hapa. Iko kwa tumbo.
Rose Mbula was this striking, elegant young lady that until sometime last year when she called her family with some good news.
Aliniambia nataka kwenda naitiwa kazi. Wakati nikamuuliza na pia akaniambia nimelipiwa. Nitaenda.
But those would only be short-lived good news until yet another mysterious phone call reached the family. A call that changed the life of this family for good.
Ndio nilipata ripoti. Nikasikia mtoto wako ameumia. Msichana alipika simu. Si alituma kwa internet zii. Sasa hiyo data zake ndio walitumiwa. Na wakaniambia alikuwa mnene. Wakati alikuja alikuwa na sura ingine, nikaona hiyo kama yeye, rangi yake ilikuwa inapinduka, inaparara, inakaa kama alikuwa mahali iko sijui nini. Unaona hii nyumba imepikwa plasta hivi, alikuwa anakaa hivi.
Details of these medical reports still sound like Greek to this family, particularly the details that doctors who allegedly treated her in India found it prudent to preserve parts of her broken skull in her stomach.
Vile waliona the bones zimevunjika vunjika, walisema they had to remove, waziweke mahali as they treat the rest of the head.
And now the medical complication has cost Rose her memory, leaving the agonizing family with millions of unanswered questions.
Kile mimi nataka ni usaidizi nione kama amerudi kama kawaida. Kwa sababu mimi sina uwezo. Nimepika mwisho ya uwezo yangu. Sasa nikaserena ndio naona tunakaa hapa. Sasa nikisema nitampeleka mahali, nitampeleka na nini?
For now, Rose is fully under the care of her family and only hopes for a miracle to get back on her feet again. Murimi Mwangi, KTN News, Nairobi.
So devastating what happened to that young woman there. All right, let's move on. Workers of a 5-story building under construction in Kiambu County escaped death narrowly earlier today when the ground floor of the building sunk. Residents in the neighboring houses were also left homeless after the bizarre incident.
The major concern, however, is why a building that had already been condemned 3 times this year by the National Construction Authority was still under construction.
Dongoro village, Lower Kabete, Kiambu County. Even from afar, the lateral cracks in the 5-story building tell a story. At close range, fresh rubble, the ground floor has sunk. The extent of the damage is far-reaching. A wall collapsed on the house behind the building, cracking its walls. Residents say it all began from 6 p.m. to the early hours of Saturday morning. Construction was ongoing when they felt earth tremor-like movements.
Kitu saa 12 kuna mafundi walikuwa hapa. Sasa unajua saidi ilianza kutilt, ile milango ikajikaza. Unaona? Unajua ile kuna ile fitting wanafanyaga ikajika. Sasa wakaanza kupiga nini ile milango ndio waweze kutoka.
Watu wengi wakaja sana, tukakaa nje for like 3 hours.
Sasa natafuta nyumba ili nihame.
It's not the first time that a building has fallen apart in this area. This is the 4th incident the National Construction Authority confirms. But there's a finer detail here. This area is said to be a wetland, one that even the late Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai had advised was not wise to construct on. NEMA has not officially earmarked it as one, the NCS says, but this building had already been condemned. Preliminary findings established that construction requirements of safety and topography had not yet been met.
3 times the National Construction Authority tried to intervene and stop the further construction of this building, but the developers went ahead. Now it has collapsed and it has caused a ripple effect on the buildings surrounding it.
Follow-up has been a bit of a challenge, but we expected that the developer and the contractor complies. The contractor and the developer might not be off the hook in this one here, but we urge the public to be patient as we make the investigations which will be coming out very soon.
The contractor is someone well known to the residents and agencies, but many are reluctant to mention him openly. The residents say 3 times he has blatantly defied orders, even turning the gates marked outward in to conceal the X mark. It's a matter of laxity when it comes to enforcement when dealing with condemned buildings that pose multiple safety threats. NCA's investigations may be underway, but residents doubt if the agency has enough muscle to deal with the contractors on their own.
Hii maneno ya kuficha maandishi ama kutozingatia sheria inatuumiza. Kwanza hata sio tu mwenye anaishi na sio pia mwenye anajenga, bali tu mwenye jirani kwa karibu na yeye, mwenye karibu na yeye. Hii si ya kwanza. Na watu ni wale watu wanapitia shortcut.
And if the pattern repeats, those in and near buildings such as this may not live to tell the story. Dorcas Wangera, KTN News, Kiambu County.
And welcome back to KTN Weekend Prime, where you get the whole story on the KTN News, a point of news. This evening we are discussing something that, like I said, should be part of the national discourse in at almost every table and almost every forum. Economic and social rights in this country, beg your pardon, are something that perhaps take a back burner when it comes to the discussions, the forums that we've had in Kenya, political rights, possessing pride of place, but there are quite a number of things that we need to be talking about with respect to the development of this country, and perhaps anchoring or pegging this discussion quite nicely is the teacher strike that's been going on for the past 4 weeks. We'll lead off of that, but first let me introduce my guest this evening, not a new face to KTN or to the country, Hassan Omar, Senator for Mombasa. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, John.
And right at the end there, we've got environmentalist and winner of the Goldman Prize 2012, Ikal Angele. Asante sana. Thank you very much for joining us, Ikal. I'll start. I know the rule should be ladies first, but I want to start with Senator Omar, because you've got an interesting bill. I got a chance to look at it. The bill on the preservation of dignity and enforcement of social and economic rights. It's a mouthful, but it sort of encapsulates what we want to talk about today. Tell us a little bit about what the bill is supposed to do.
The bill tries to translate some of the very broad aspirations or pronouncements of the Constitution into law and a program upon which this law can be enacted. It tries to join the spirit upon what the Constitution provided, Article 19, the preservation of human dignity, Article 43, which then provides the kinds of issues that we're talking about, right to food, social security, education, healthcare, water and sanitation. And then ties it also to Article 174, which is part of the socio-economic development that under the objects of devolution, and then ties it to Article 21(2), which provides that the state shall provide, legislative policy and other measures to ensure the enforcement of these rights. So for me, the bill is simply trying to give a program where county governments shall demonstrate how they are trying to progressively realize these socioeconomic rights within the context of their counties. These are most of the socioeconomic rights articulated in Article 43 are actually functions of the county government.
They're now part of the
Part 2, the 4th schedule, which outlines the functions of county governments. So what we're trying to do in Kenya, when things remain in the Constitution as broad aspirations, they are hardly binding. So we're looking for an enforcement regime. In fact, very few countries have tried to put together an enforcement regime. And this enforcement regime is not only for countries that are wealthy. This is about dealing with the inequalities in Kenya, issues of social justice that we have. So there must be demonstrable policy or legislative actions that are being taken by county governments and national government to mitigate their inequalities, to mitigate the lack of access to some of these basic amenities.
All right, let's use a recent news event. Like I mentioned, the teacher strike. 4 weeks into the teacher strike, there was quite a bit of an impasse between the government and the teachers. How do you think a law like this would have helped resolve some of those issues or clarify some of those issues?
It sets the obligations. It talks about what kind of investment governments need to make progressively in education. You need to demonstrate that it is the right that you have secured and guaranteed within the spheres of your government policy. It will have come in from the very conception of budgeting, from the budget policy statements to the national budget estimates. In terms of the architecture of public finance, you introduce this issue of economic and social rights, including the right to education. Therefore, government must demonstrate how progressively it is trying to achieve these rights articulated in the Constitution and the MDGs. And it being a right, therefore, means that and the education we are talking about is quality education. Quality education means you must not only invest in giving people laptops or what are they called, tablets. You must invest in human resource capacity so that teachers are motivated, so that the standards of education then can appear to have an upward trajectory. What we see today is private schools are doing far better, meaning that there isn't sufficient development or investment in human capital. There isn't sufficient investment in human resource. And you cannot pretend that you want to develop a country without sufficient investment in its human resource.
All right, Ikal, let's bring you in. You've been part of a larger fight, a transnational fight between perhaps the residents of Turkana and especially the residents around Lake Turkana and the Ethiopian government with the development of the Gibe project. How would a law like this have helped resolve that? I mean, it's just a corollary to the question I asked Hassan. How would a law like this have helped? Or perhaps a question should be, did you feel a gap in the laws that we currently have when you were trying to pursue this legally?
I think one of the problems that we went through was how do you engage government, because
all this, when development is said to be in the best interest of the country, when it actually, it in many ways victimizes the people within where the resources are, is where we feel there's a gap. And it's generally overall where the communities where resources are found are seen to be beneficiaries. So it's like the economic and social rights are not met by the government, but then the corporations come and give them as corporate social responsibility. So when you don't have education, you don't have healthcare, and then the corporations or the development that is seen to be in the betterment of the country is what is then sort of traded off for such communities. So we felt that there was no space for us to argue this, because in many a times the argument was it's in the best interest of the country.
Well, the government would argue, at least that there would be an argument for the government in saying that perhaps they do not have the economic capacity, and it's in the constitution that they don't have the economic capacity to be able to give these rights to the people of Turkana, to the people of different parts of the country. How then do you use the arguments that you've been given to counter that? If it's within the constitution and it's a right of the government to say, hey, we just don't have the money to do this, then how do you turn this around?
I think the argument, the constant argument that we don't have the money to is where we start. When we start with the narrative of saying we don't have the money, then yet there is money to do other things. Why don't we look at our priorities? So we start to look at the economic and social rights of these communities as it's sort of like it does not bring it's not an economic argument, and that's where we start from. So it is easier to sort issues that are seen to bring the economic benefits, yet the economic and social rights, the benefits to such communities does not need to have a financial benefit or economic achievement for the country.
Turkana County is one of the richest counties in terms of its mineral wealth, its natural resource wealth. Do you think that the county government there, as well as the national government, have the people's interest as a primary consideration, their economic and social interest as a primary consideration, or the greater good of the Kenyan public with being able to pump oil out of there, or wind energy, or the many other things that are happening from there? Whose interest do you think trump whose, or should supersede whose?
I think the drive for Kenya to achieve economic growth, to achieve further economic growth, to be a middle-income country, seems to be superseding anything else. So the rights of the people, the analysis that the land is actually a livelihood to the communities, is pushed aside, and it is seen that the resource is more important. So we are trying to achieve economic growth, be a middle-income country, and so that trade-off. And communities are told, well, this will come back and support you, but without the achievement. So the argument is, if you look at the newspapers, they will say the number of jobs that have been given, the number of contracts that have been, the amount of money that Talo and other companies are spending in this area, as if it is a token. Yet what Talo is benefiting out of that land, that resource, is much more. So I think the argument should really change. And so in our perception, the interests of the communities are not primary, and it is the need to pump out the oil by 2022 or before that comes first.
Did you get a look at the oil contracts that we have and be able to analyze whether this was a consideration at any level? Because in circles, in oil circles, if I can call them that, Kenya, the people who talk within these circles say that Kenya does fairly well in terms of the consideration of the rights of the people on the ground.
Looking at the contracts, so one, getting the contracts is a problem. So you'll get piecemeal of the contracts. That becomes, so you're basically piecing issues to be able to look at whose interests are taken care of. But looking at the petroleum legislation that is still a bill, you can see some improvement. However, the space for community engagement is lacking. A lot of power still is in central government. Counties do not have so much representation in any of the frameworks. That means the Cabinet Secretary of Energy holds a lot of power. A lot of power is within central government, which then denies county governments the space to engage and really represent the people.
Okay,
John, I want to say something.
Yeah.
You're saying Kenya is doing well because of people like a car. Trust me, there's EITI, Extractive Industry Transparency Initiatives, lately, that it requires states to involve the whole litany of stakeholders, including civil society and residents. And these are the things that have constantly improved or evolved our extractive industry, transparency model. So I think it's largely because of Kenyans pushing for these issues. We see all these contracts that were entered in the yesteryear as well, which are of a total detriment to the Kenyan people. Well, I think also, just revisiting the issue of ECOSOC, it is not, in terms of the enforcement regime of economic social rights, it does not depend on the wealth of a nation.
Yeah.
Nations must demonstrate, no matter how wealthy or poor they are, what programs they have put into place. Kenyans, in fact, can go to court, and the burden of responsibility is on the government to demonstrate what it has done to put into place measures to mitigate the adherence or the obligations under this Article 43. Secondly, I must say this, almost all governors have totally missed the narrative of devolution.
Yeah.
Devolution was about economic social development, it was about bringing service delivery, it was about accountable and democratic government that is nearer to the people. Governors think that they want these mega projects, they want to mirror the national government. So they miss the plot on devolution and some of them are doing social justice work with politicization. In social justice work, you need to depoliticize policy. So governors today are launching boreholes in 50 years on and think they're doing a great thing. In fact, we should be ashamed of ourselves as a country, launching boreholes where we used to have pipe water. Like, I come from a place called Old Town. When I was growing up, we used to have pipe water in Old Town, Kibokoni. It was flowing, you could drink from the taps. Lately, you go around launching boreholes and think you're making progress. I think we've moved backward. So I think what happens, we need to depoliticize policy, we need to have a framework, and that's why this framework provides a mandatory socio-economic plan integrated in the county, it's a county integrated development plan, where then there will be a robust citizen participation so that citizens can be able to prioritize. I just kept joking, somebody was saying, would you need a borehole, or would you need a water point, or would you need what would you need, or would you need a bullfighting ring? So, or would you need a Formula 1 ring or Formula 1 race course in Machakos, or what would you need as your priority as a county government? So I think this is what we need to do, so that people in Mombasa, people in Kwale, people in Kilifi, people everywhere in the country can come and prioritize. That's why the participation of the people is there, to ensure people's participation in governance. It's not, we don't want this house of wisdom where a governor believes he knows it all, and yet you find a myriad of complaints that are generated within the populace. So I think this bill tries to give a framework upon how all these kinds of things can be realized in terms of people prioritizing what they need in their counties.
All right, let's speak about something that's also that's been something of a sore spot for Kenya for a long time, and this is land. Again, going back to a recent story, there were evictions in your county fairly recently.
Yes.
Now, with respect to the law that you're proposing and the structure in which discussions around what should happen in a case like that can be had, there's also, this I guess is something that we've brought up also, there's also the other side of this argument, which is where does the greater good of the public parry with what's been going on? Because evictions happen because presumably people have encroached on land that's supposed to be used by everybody. Where then does the argument about the greater good get into this conversation?
You see, I think there's no eviction that appears to mitigate the kind of suffering. There are UN guidelines on eviction. They must be done with a clear notice. Those people who are to be evicted must have been demonstrably relocated to another area. They need to be done during broad daylight, when the weather conditionalities are not harsh. So there are UN guidelines. We have the eviction laws that have just stalled in Parliament. So I think what we do is we are using this opportunity by stalling the legal framework, so that then we avert ourselves from the responsibility to mitigate the kinds of adversity or the kind of harsh situations we put people in. And that's why I asked the critical question: where were you every time when people were building all this time long? And then only for you to come and realize 12 years on, 15 years on, that this is actually private land and it needs to be developed. So I think there are fundamental issues that need to be interrogated. And a government that is humane will have a structure or formula in terms of even how it carries carries out its evictions. The notice will be given. There is massive, land in this country where people can be relocated and given some kind of a capacity to start up. And I think there are ways in which the National Land Alliance and other land lobbies have made tangible proposals that have been thrown out of the window in terms of how evictions can be carried out. We're not saying that we should not develop, but it must be tempered with humanity. It must go with all that notion about preservation of human dignity. So the indignation of a few cannot be justification for development.
All right.
I think just to add to that, the aspect, a lot of times evictions is looked at from the point of when you're moving people who are leaving sort of like a house, but then the aspect of evictions in terms of livelihoods is totally ignored. So when people are either pastoralists, fisher folk, so their livelihood, when they are evicted from accessing access to their livelihoods, is totally ignored in the conversation. So that is left aside, especially when discussing whether it's compensation or their rights to access their livelihoods.
All right. Critics would say economic and social rights are expensive. They're extremely expensive. And if you listen to the government's argument right now, again, just to go back to the argument that we don't have any money, economic and social rights are things that ought to be attained progressively. Now, if we were to take up Senator Omar's proposal, what do you think the opportunity cost would be for the country's economic growth, Eka?
I think one of the things that, it's the narrative that we have to look at. So when you're looking at the economic and social rights, you have to first, before you put money on the table, is looking at issues around equality, equity distribution, environmental justice, and inclusivity. So if you start that conversation from that point of view, I think there is space to then say how progressive, what is progressive, because my progressive and different government progressive may be different. I guess that's the argument for the teachers, is that it's been progressive for how long? Since we were in high school, it's been progressive. And so that argument of progressive means that there's somebody not on the table. So the inclusivity of the unions or the different parties who are having this, who are in this issue, needs to be there. So and it's very hard to say it's expensive when trips, if a trip for the president or the deputy president is costing millions of shillings, if we look to that, and then you have all these different costs that we're not looking at, then it's very hard for me, if I was a teacher or any other person, doctors tomorrow will not be able to listen to that argument when you're saying let's live within our means. And if you're saying let's live within our means, that we don't have the budget, then let's really analyze what is living within our means.
All right. Senator Hassan, tell me, let's drill down now to something that perhaps the people out there can relate to. We just ran a story this evening on the fate of a young lady in Kitui who has parts of her skull stashed in her stomach. Presumably, from what it looks like, would be a case of medical malpractice. There are other cases of the abuse of economic and social rights that we see on a daily basis. The question that a lot of Kenyans ask, though, is who do you turn to? How do you enforce rights either for yourself, or how do you get institutions to enforce these rights? This is bad behavior as a journalist, but the second question would be, how is your law going to be able to help people get those kinds of alternatives?
In fact, the word we use there is enforcement. Because in Kenya, where the devil is in enforcement and respect for these rights and for promotion of these rights. So I think what we're doing is, first and foremost, we're creating obligations. These obligations are not CSR programs. Let no government cheat you that it's about CSR, about how much Tulo is going to reinvest in the community, or titanium-based titanium was going to invest in Kwale. It's about also making maximum benefit in terms of the taxations that they get, so that we can then put them into programs that then structurally benefit the Kenyan people. So the enforcement regime here is going to court to enforce these rights, because there are obligations that arise on government. And government, this progressive is what we are trying to define. There will be a 5-year socioeconomic plan, and that is what will demonstrate how much investment you're making. So even if somebody goes to court, a government can demonstrate, or county government can demonstrate that we're making this type of an investment, and that's why we've tried to change the architecture of public finance, so that this whole issue of economic and social right comes in right at the point of budget policy statement. IBEC, the Intergovernmental Budget Committee that the Deputy President chairs, so that then they can be able to raise these issues about what kind of investment needs to be made. And in terms of, therefore, then we have enforcement agencies, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights and other Article 59 commissions that deal with the Chapter 4, which is where Article 43 is located in. So these commissions, the courts are an enforcement agency, and then the Senate and the County Assembly, as per the law, will be making binding recommendations on county governments to be integrated in their annual fiscal planning, in terms of their annual annual budget, so that finally when their finance bill becomes law, it must reflect how it's going to invest in these critical areas. And therefore the young lady there should have been able to, the governor of Kitui should have been able to say that she has access to free and quality medical services on the basis of that promise of socio-economic rights, and therefore she's entitled to those kinds of you should not always wait for philanthropy. I believe some good meaning Kenyans might intervene, but our health, our education should not be the work of philanthropy and CSR, and these are the capital developments that we need. And once you invest in people, these people become productive, so they grow the economy. You missed that point. Most of us are not productive in this economy. That's why President Kenyatta was saying 1.5%. But you need to grow the productivity of every Kenyan. You need to grow the productivity of counties. That's why you need to invest more money in counties. It's the same principle in business. So when the productivity means our taxes are going to rise, our counties are going to be producing more, and once that happens, therefore, the economy grows, there will be more direct local and foreign investment, and therefore we're able to provide for these rights in a more robust way, because the monies will be available.
All right, Ikal, let's widen this a little now and talk about corruption and how it's the interplay between corruption and the attainment of economic and social rights. In your experience, how bad of an effect has corruption of any sort had on the attainment of the rights of the people of Turkana County?
I think generally one of the things that we have to realize is, if we don't, even if we're saying we want 15% of the revenues to come, if we cannot use the current amount of money that is there to make sure that we're looking at, we're not adding infrastructure because all the members of the County Assembly want infrastructure. We're actually adding infrastructure based on the need of the people to this infrastructure. So if the little funds that we have are sort of eaten up bit by bit, so even if it's from the top, if it's the county executive, then the next person, by the time the project gets to the community, it will be a borehole drilled but never piped. It will be a classroom built but never staffed. It will be a health facility built but then no staff or no housing for the staff. So eventually, even if you have the infrastructure in place, then the people do not have access to this, whether it's education, healthcare, water, housing, whatever basic needs. And that's not only in Turkana but cut across the country. So we have, whether we like it or not, corruption is big on the table. And until we address it, and it's not only from the ESCC addressing it, but when we citizens start to say we will not allow for this, so we are social auditors within our different wards, villages, counties, then is when we will be able to really start to talk about what Senator Omar is saying, really being able to value or hold the economic and social rights.
Senator, do you think that there needs to be additional legislation specifically linked to corruption and the attainment of economic and social rights, or do we have enough in terms of force of law?
We've been remembering more of late. This shows you how this, as a nation, we've degenerated in terms of values.
If it's rose-tinted that we remember 24 years later.
President Moi said you cannot solve some of these issues through legislation. You cannot give integrity to one based on legislation. If you're a thief, you remain a thief. Unfortunately, when we put you into government, you'll look for other ways to pilferage the economy. Things might look good on paper, but they don't add up in common sense. You see, I can tell you for a fact the procurement processes for the 100,000 shilling wheelbarrow was probably followed. There were probably 3 quotations, and that was the lowest bidder. but on common sense. And I can tell you it cuts across. I've seen documents from various counties because I see it in the public accounts. It might all add up on paper.
Including your own?
Including my own. In fact, that's what makes me extremely angry. I mean, I think as politicians, we are paid extremely well. You know, I mean, I look at where I come from personally. I think in life I have made certain progress. Why should I continue to proliferate an economy of a county or of a nation just for the comfort of myself and to look like I'm so loaded, throwing a little bits of money in here and there? Why don't you put in structures to help these people? You say you are wealthy. How come you've never solved the problem of the entire society? Because these problems must be sorted out by programs. You must ensure that people have access to good quality education. You can't go about paying school fees indefinitely. You must ensure, rather than pay for hospital bills, improve the health system.
Yeah, but Senator, if there is a coalition, not a coalition, or what's the word that I'm looking for here? Confluence of interests between MCAs, the governor, and perhaps even the National Assembly and the Senate, not to put economic and social rights on the top of the agenda, then how will this ever change? Because you are the vehicles through which
that's why we're trying to get. That's why in Kenya things are not binding until they are law. That's why, unfortunately, President Moi said, you can't legislate on everything. Some of these things is for us Kenyans as we are making our own decisions. I know John Allen, put against another candidate, I know who I can choose. These integrity are not things you buy from the shelf of a supermarket. They are these causes that are built over time. You know, my worldview is developed over a period of time. You know what I did and said when I used it in the university, in the KNCHR. You know, if you employ people on the basis of their CVs, their backgrounds, why would you think this person who presents an extremely vicious CV on integrity will bring integrity to public service? If this person has been alleged for all kinds of crimes that were committed under the moon, why would you think he will not commit these crimes when you make him president? So I think these are some of the things that we need to internalize as a country as we make the choices of our leaders. And we must desist from these issues about ethnicity, I remember when I was joining Mombasa politics, I was told there are two elements of Mombasa politics, thuggery and resources. I used neither, and the people of Mombasa still voted for me. And I think we must now more and more be agenda-based. And once we become agenda-based and present we plead to the Kenyan public on the basis of the quality of our soundedness of our vision, then this is where we will be taking Kenya forward. But I can tell you for a fact that you cannot bargain for one thing and expect to get another. If you buy oranges, you will get oranges. If you buy avocado, you will get avocado juice. You cannot buy avocado and expect to squeeze the oranges out of it.
True. Karl, as we wind up now, let's get your final thoughts here with this question. If you take a look at some of the budget hearings prior to the presentation of the national budget estimates, they're almost empty. Some of these halls are almost empty for a majority of that period. And that speaks to a disengagement, maybe an apathy. I don't know what the reason is, but there is a level of disengagement between the public and the man on the ground, the woman on the ground, and their responsibility to be able to police government. How do you carry, as a person who's worked with civil society, how do you carry the public along with you to be able to understand the importance of economic, social rights and other rights to their lives individually?
I think one of the things that we have seen out there is when you talk about the big figures, when you talk about hundreds of billions of shillings, so that person in the village is thinking that's not in my reach, so you have to break it down. And I think one of the challenges we've had and what has been ignored for a long time is how to break it down so that that person in the village who is a herdsman but has children in school can be able to realize that this means education for my child, this means healthcare, this means a cattle dip for my animals, this means fodder during emergency drought. So being able to break that down is of importance, but also highlighting to them that the economic development is based on their ability to participate. So it is inclusivity, so that it is not, they don't see it as a big word, an elitist word out there, but really means to them, meaning that when I go and sit and listen to the budget, even at the local level, it means that I am able to inform, to at least fight for that economic and social rights.
All right. Hassan, as we wind up, what's the process now? How far is this bill from becoming law, and when do we think that we're going to be able to see the bill on preservation of dignity and enforcement of social economic rights becoming part of the national discourse?
First and foremost, the new constitution came to change fundamentally the nature and character of government and the way we do politics. I launched a strategic plan a week ago to just try and change the nature of how we do politics. Because I came into the political sphere and I was in a culture shock. For the last 1 year, 1.5, I've been learning, I've been trying to see. And there are certain transgressions of the political class that are unacceptable. And that's why the people out there give the young people, the people who have never been in politics, this opportunity so that they can change the nature of politics and how we do politics. You know, the one thing politics does is to change you. But the challenge we have is to change politics and the nature of how we do politics. So this bill also came to change the nature of how government organizes itself by prioritizing economic and social rights. It codified them as part of the obligations county and national governments have. So where we are now is to the constitution. That is, now this bill tries to give some fodder in terms of moving ourselves forward. So it's now at the committee stage. We have the first reading. We are now in the process of public participation. So we've had several public forums. We had one last week. We are going to have one this week, the coming week, with the KNCHR and other Article 59 commissions, Gender and Equality Commission, the CRA, so that they can advise on part of the formula we're suggesting in terms of the division of the Equalization Fund. And I'm hoping that if we're able to run these paces, the committee, that's the Legal and Human Rights Committee, which I'm the convener of the subcommittee on human rights, should be able, through Senator Wako, who's the chair, present a report of the committee maybe in the next month, or in the next 2 weeks, in a month. And then after that, then the bill now, there will be the second reading where we'll all be able to participate. Then we'll go to committee stage. So I see ourselves at least as Senate passing this bill at least by the time we in December, but when we go for by the time before we raise for the December recess, and then it will now go to the National Assembly for concurrence. I hope they will not mutilate it fundamentally
or politicize it
to alter the character of the bill and the objective that it
all right.
embodies.
Senator Hassan Omar from Mombasa County, thank you very much for joining us, as well as you, Ikalangele, environmentalist and Goldman Prize winner 2012. Before I wind up, I just want to get people's understanding of what exactly it is we're talking about. We just have a few slides that I want us to run on our Super Wall fairly quickly as we wind up this discussion on the kind of rights, the specific rights under Article 43 that we're talking about. If my director can do that fairly quickly, I know. There we go. So the highest attainable standard of health, which includes the right to healthcare services. There are quite a number of them, and we'll just keep them rolling, hopefully also as Yvonne Okwara does her wind up this evening. That's just one of them. There are quite a number of them. If you want to look at what specific rights we're talking about, go to Article 19 in our Constitution, as well as Article 43. Another right there is accessible and adequate housing, freedom from hunger. Those are the kinds of socio-economic rights that we're talking about, and those are the rights that affect everybody at every level. And this is something that I think includes every Kenyan of all walks of life. So it's an important discussion, one that Yvonne Okwara has been following this evening, and now brings us a summation of what we've been talking about on What's a Point. Yvonne. All right, I'm told we're going to take a break right now, and then we'll come back. Yvonne has more stories, including that summation, hopefully, on KTN Weekend Prime. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, the hashtag is #TheOtherKenya. Keep your feedback coming in. We're going to sample some of that later on. Thank you once again to my guests. Back after a moment.
Now, it is not so often that you will hear a story of how terror activities are planned and executed from an insider. Well, the story of one Daniel Ocheso is about making a decision that has put his life at risk. The man who now preaches the word of God escaped from a terror group, and although he has a bounty on his head, regrets are not part of his life.
Nilienda kwa msitu nikakaa miezi mitatu. Ninatoka kwa msitu naingia boma yote niko na chakula. Bora watu wamepika chakula yote nitakula, nitaenda. Mvua ikinyesha nitafuta nyumba yenye haijaisha, nitalala pale.
This was the beginning of Daniel Ocheso's treacherous journey. In the year 1996, in his hometown of Kakamega, innocent 15-year-old Daniel was lured into joining the infamous Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda.
Walikuja kutuchukua usiku. Tukaenda usiku tena, tukaingia kwa msitu. Msitu mmoja kule kunaitwa sehemu inaitwa Goma kule paka wa Kongo na Uganda huko. Msitu mkubwa sana. Tulipofika pale tukabadilisha manguo. Napewa manguo zile zimeraruka, sinanuka kweli. Zile ni zenye wewe unapewa. Mnaanza kufundishwa punduki vitu kama hizo.
2 years down the line, Ocheso rose through the rank to the position of commander. Under the leadership of LRA founder Joseph Kony Daniel, he was forced to commit untold evils as the rebels fought to gain control of gold mines.
Kule msituni, yule bwana alipokuwa ameona ukiwa mwaminifu kwake. Unajua wakati hata watu walikuwa anakupiga marisasi anakuwa atakayote. Lakini sasa alikuja kugundua kiini ya kuua ni nini. Kumbe ukienda against yeye tu kidogo. Kama utasema siri kidogo, wewe utoboi hiyo siku.
After 5 years, he made up his mind to escape and made his way back home with the help of a Kenyan who was crossing the border into Kenya.
Ile siku mimi nilitokelezea nikaona barabara, nilitembea kabisa na ujasiri. Lakini mbeleni niliona kuna mama alimpata pale. Mama anatoka Kenya, nikamuona naongea na mwingine Kiswahili. Mimi nilipotokelezea maana wanajulikana rebels ukimuona wewe umeisha. Nilipotokelezea hapa nikamwambia mama, hata usiokope.
In 2000